State your name for the record. Please spell your last name.
Michael Joseph Jackson, Jackson.
Well, obviously it's going to take time to properly assess the magnitude of his contribution, the depth of his genius, and the global impact that he's had, though I suspect that we can immediately take note of what that means. They say journalism is the first, if you will, draft of history. Historians from 20, 25 years from now will begin to properly and adequately assess his impact on the music itself. But I think there's no question that Michael Jackson was the foremost entertainer of his generation, perhaps of all time, arguably, taking the skills of a Sammy Davis Jr., bringing together the street dance of African-American urban culture, joining them to the politics of dance of Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly on that sphere alone. And then what he did with his voice in two careers, essentially divided between his childhood, when he's a young man of 8 and 9 and 10 years old, coming to maturity in, if you will, Gary, Indiana, out of the black working class, fomenting one of the most powerful musical careers of any group in the aftermath of the civil rights movement, and then with that powerful blues-drenched voice, giving, expression to sentiments and emotions that are far older and deeper and more ancient than him. And then in his second career, giving voice to one of the most delicate instruments that expressed a range of emotions, that had a high end in its tenor and falsetto, and surprisingly deep vibrato. So I think that Michael Jackson, just as an entertainer, as a figure who embodies the contradictions of black identity and the possibilities of R&B music in the 70s and 80s, will continue to be one of the most recognized and formidable, human beings that we've ever produced in our tradition.
It's impossible to really get at the depth and the complexity of the genius of Michael Joseph Jackson. It's not just a major loss, it's a monumental loss. Michael Jackson was part of that tremendous wave in the ocean of human expression. Michael Jackson was someone who was so disciplined, who was so committed to what he was called to do, who did his work and did it well and did it at a level of excellence that the world will always have to take notice, always giving all of himself, everything of mind, body, heart, and soul at a level of not even just excellence, but of the sublime. That's Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson's humanity is so deep, the implications and inferences of his art so monumentally and magnificently global that nothing American television could do to besmirch his character could ever, if you will, deny the legitimate genius that he represents, and America has responded, as indeed has the globe.
Any great artist, it could be Beethoven wrestling with his nephew who was pushed to suicidal attempts. It could be Dostoevsky with gambling habits. Any great artist is wrestling with their sadness and loneliness, their fears, anxieties, and insecurities, and they're transfiguring those into complicated forms of expression that affect our hearts, minds, and souls and remind us of who we are as human beings, the fragility of our human status and the inevitability of death. Michael Jackson was a great artist who also happened to be the greatest entertainer, not just of his generation, but of the 20th century. Trying to make sense of the world, given this immense talent, tremendous discipline, and determination to express himself, and most importantly, being true to the calling of getting his work done. So that, yes, he did have those kind of political effects and consequences, but first and foremost, as a great artist who happened to also be a great entertainer, he was able to express himself in such a way that he allowed us to have a sense of what it feels like to be alive. He had a joy in being alive. There was a joy you felt of him on the stage and making us not just feel good, but pushing us against ourselves with the man in the mirror, looking at ourselves critically, black or white. What does it mean to get caught in a color as opposed to a rich history and culture? What does it mean to talk about the future with maybe tomorrow? I mean, we can go on and on with his artistic expressions. At the deepest level, he's a human being who made sense of the world at the highest level of excellence, and people will talk about him in the same way they've talked about all the great artists down through the quarters of time.
Michael Joseph Jackson's genius was the ability to be the raw article himself, the real article himself. He is part of the African American people who were marginalized. Michael Jackson had to come further and go deeper into the pit of possibility of American democracy and of cultural expression. I think ultimately Michael Jackson begins to moonwalk away, and he begins to express one of the most profound articulations of human possibility that we've seen in the 20th century. Michael Jackson's childhood was one of enormous, prodigious production. He was a child prodigy. He was a wunderkind. He was a chocolate genius who was capable of, as a child, evoking emotions that were far beyond his age. Think about his recitation at 10 years old of Smokey Robinson's When I Had You. So here was a man who was denied his childhood, who was an adult, and then when he became an adult, tried to salvage with disastrous consequences to a certain degree his own childhood. Maybe F. Scott Fitzgerald's words can be twisted. There are no second childhoods in America, but Michael Jackson gave us, out of the depth of his suffering, a transcendental possibility of looking at black identity through the prism of black art, and therefore the universal application of our humanity has been untouched.
No, it's very real. I think those who choose to find joy in serving others, those who choose to find their voice, to pursue their vocation, and to act on their vision, oftentimes have to sacrifice much, my brother. It's almost like a crucifixion in terms of the cross you have to bear. And we reap the fruits of the resurrection in terms of the power that emanates from his sacrifice. He sacrificed his childhood because he loved us so. And he didn't just entertain us, he sustained us. In that regard, it's part and parcel of the calling of the great artist, though, brother. I don't know of a great artist who did not sacrifice and thereby have to wrestle with depths of loneliness and sadness.
Nor would I change any part of my life. However, today, when I create my music, I feel like an instrument of nature. I wonder what delight nature must feel when we open our hearts and express our God-given talents.
Well, there's no question. I think that he did derive an ultimate sense of joy and satisfaction in what others enjoyed from him that was denied to himself. There's no question that the transcendent art that he created was a means, an instrument, a vehicle for others to experience what he didn't. His soul got more deeply rooted in the existential agony and the profound social grief that black people are heir to. And what he did was he allowed us, through his voice and his instrument, to see a glimpse of the heaven that he himself was denied. That sacrifice was the ultimate source of redemption that he gave to us. We celebrate that genius, we thank him for the sacrifice, and we love his soul wherever he resides now in a heavenly place that he gave to us before he left here.
This goes hand in hand with any of us who are determined to find joy in serving others. Long live the genius, the legacy of Michael Joseph Jackson. There's no one like him. There will never be anyone like him. We shall keep track of his art and his music, even as we pray for his humanity, and most importantly, the living, those who love him, ourselves and his blessed family.
The sound of approval rose across the universe, and the whole world abounds in magic. Wonder fills our hearts, what we have glimpsed for an instant, the playfulness of life.